Have you ever stood in the shadow of Stonehenge or walked through the misty groves once sacred to the ancient Druids and wondered what secrets those stones still hold? For centuries, we've been taught that these mysterious figures were wise priests, poets, and judges keepers of nature's wisdom. But what if their true knowledge ran far deeper than folklore? What if, hidden within their rituals and chants, lay the key to a technology so advanced it defies modern understanding? Today, we're setting out on a journey into one of history's most tantalizing enigmas, the possibility that the Druids mastered the art of levitation through sound. Imagine a time when massive stone blocks weighing tons were not dragged or rolled into place, but lifted effortlessly into the air by the resonant power of human voice and sacred instruments. It sounds like something from myth or science fiction, yet echoes of this idea ripple through ancient texts, local legends, and even the accounts of early historians. Could it be that these revered figures possessed a sonic technology so sophisticated it allowed them to manipulate gravity itself? This isn't just speculation, it's a theory grounded in tantalizing clues, from the precise placement of megalithic monuments to the strange acoustic properties found at ancient sites. As we venture deeper into this mystery together, we'll uncover the compelling evidence that suggests the Druids were far more than spiritual leaders. They may have been brilliant innovators, harnessing the hidden power of sound in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. From the haunting hum of standing stones to the rhythmic incantations described in Celtic lore, we'll explore how frequency, vibration, and resonance could have been used to achieve what seems impossible. So settle in and open your mind. What you're about to discover may forever change how you see the ancient world, and just maybe reveal a forgotten chapter in humanity's quest to unlock the secrets of the universe. To truly grasp the possibility of such an advanced technology, we must first understand the minds who might have wielded it. The Druids were far more than the stereotypical wise old men in white robes we often picture. They formed the intellectual and spiritual backbone of Celtic societies across ancient Britain, Ireland, and Gaul, serving as judges, historians, astronomers, philosophers, and mediators between the people and the divine. Their influence was immense. A Druid's word could stop a battle between warring tribes, and their rulings on legal and religious matters were absolute. This wasn't a casual role. It was a position earned through decades of the most rigorous and secretive education system in the ancient Western world. Aspiring Druids underwent a legendary training period said to last up to 20 years. This education was conducted entirely through oral tradition. Not a single lesson was written down. Students had to memorize vast amounts of knowledge, countless poems, complex legal codes, intricate astronomical charts, and the detailed histories of their people. This monumental feat of memory wasn't just a cultural preference, it was a deliberate act of secrecy. By committing everything to memory, the Druids ensured their most powerful knowledge could never be captured, stolen, or understood by outsiders. It was a living library, locked away in the minds of the initiated. This practice hints at the immense value they placed on their information, suggesting it contained principles and understandings they believed were too potent to be misused. This culture of extreme secrecy is a crucial piece of the puzzle. Why go to such lengths to protect knowledge about the stars, lore, and poetry, unless, of course, that knowledge was far more potent than simple poetry? Many historians believe their teachings encompassed a deep, practical understanding of natural forces, what we might now call physics, geology, and acoustics. They were meticulous observers of the natural world, studying the patterns of the seasons, the movements of celestial bodies, and the hidden energies of the earth. Their ceremonies were held in specific groves or at powerful natural sites, chosen not at random but for their unique properties. This suggests their role was to act as conduits or interpreters of the world's underlying energy, wielding a science so advanced it was indistinguishable from magic. This profound influence and secretive power is precisely why they became a target for one of history's most powerful empires. When the Romans, under emperors like Tiberius and Claudius, began their conquest of Gaul and Britain, they systematically sought to eradicate the Druidic class. The Roman historians who documented these campaigns, such as Pliny the Elder, expressed a combination of fascination and outright fear toward the Druids. The Romans weren't just suppressing a competing religion, they were dismantling a rival power structure. They recognized that the Druids were the keepers of Celtic identity and resistance. By destroying their sacred groves like the one on Anglesey and outlawing their practices, the Romans aimed to break the spirit of the people and erase a competing source of authority and knowledge that they could not control or comprehend. The Roman suppression ultimately succeeded in shattering the formal Druidic order, driving their practices underground and allowing their deepest secrets to fade into legend. This historical context is vital. It frames the Druids not as primitive shamans, but as the custodians of a sophisticated and potentially powerful understanding of the universe, an understanding that a conquering empire felt compelled to violently erase. Their commitment to oral tradition, which protected their secrets for centuries, also meant that when their line was broken, the finest nuances of their knowledge were lost forever. We are left with fragments, echoes, and the haunting question of what truly died with the last of the great Druidic teachers. This culture of extreme secrecy raises a profound question that echoes across centuries. What constitutes forbidden knowledge in our modern world, where information is freely traded and instantly accessible? The idea of deliberately concealing a powerful technology is almost incomprehensible. Yet for the Druids, and indeed for many ancient cultures, certain understandings were considered too potent, too dangerous for general use. This wasn't about hoarding power for its own sake, but about a deeply ingrained belief that some forces, if misapplied, could unravel the very fabric of society and the natural order. The decision to keep such knowledge secret was likely a heavy responsibility, a sacred duty to protect both the people and the knowledge itself from corruption. We can break down the reasons for this secrecy into three interconnected layers: societal stability, spiritual sanctity, and the balance of power. On a societal level, imagine a technology that could move mountains literally. If the power to levitate massive stones with sound was common knowledge, it could have dismantled the existing social structure. The authority of the Druids, and by extension the chieftains and kings they counseled, was built upon their unique mastery of the natural and spiritual world. If every village could effortlessly construct impregnable fortresses or rearrange the landscape, it would have led to chaos, constant warfare, and a complete loss of centralized control. The knowledge was protected to maintain a stable, functional civilization. The spiritual reasons run even deeper. For the Druids, the world was alive with spirit and energy. Their practices were about maintaining harmony with these unseen forces, not exploiting them. The use of sacred sound in rituals was likely seen as a form of communion, a way to align human intention with the vibrational fabric of the universe. To use this same principle for purely practical or ego-driven construction projects could have been viewed as a profound sacrilege, a violation of a sacred covenant that would invite disaster. This reflects a worldview where technology and spirituality were inseparable. To wield such power required not just technical skill, but also moral and spiritual purity. It was knowledge that demanded wisdom from its wielder. Finally, we must consider the raw political dimension. Controlling access to such a transformative technology granted the Druids immense soft power. Their ability to advise on where to build a fortress, a temple, or a ceremonial site, and potentially to oversee its construction through extraordinary means, made them indispensable. This secured their position as the ultimate arbiters in their society, immune from the petty squabbles of tribal warfare. Their secrecy was a shield, ensuring that this power could not be turned against the people or used by a tyrant for conquest. In this light, the Roman eradication of the Druidic order takes on a new dimension. It wasn't merely a clash of religions, but a targeted strike to permanently seize and nullify a source of power that even the mighty Roman Empire could not replicate or control, effectively silencing a competing technological and spiritual authority forever. Though the Druids and their potential sonic mastery might seem like an isolated mystery, they were far from alone in their exploration of sound's hidden power. Across the ancient world, from the sun-baked theaters of Greece to the high monasteries of Tibet, we find a recurring theme: a sophisticated, almost scientific understanding of acoustics and vibration that modern science is only now beginning to appreciate. This wasn't just about creating music for entertainment, it was about harnessing a fundamental force of the universe. The ancient Greeks, for instance, designed their open-air amphitheaters with breathtaking acoustic precision. In places like Epidaurus, a performer standing on the stage can speak in a normal, conversational voice and be heard perfectly by someone sitting in the very back row, dozens of meters away, without any electronic amplification. This isn't an accident of architecture. It's a masterful application of sonic physics, achieved through the precise shaping of stone seats to act as natural acoustic filters that dampen low-frequency crowd noise while amplifying the higher frequencies of the human voice. This practical application of sound finds a more spiritual counterpart in the resonant hum of Tibetan singing bowls. For centuries, these bowls have been used in meditation and healing practices across the Himalayas. When struck or circled with a mallet, they produce a rich, complex tone that seems to vibrate not just in the air, but deep within the body of the listener. Practitioners believe these specific frequencies can alter consciousness, promote deep relaxation, and restore balance to the mind and body. While often viewed through a purely spiritual lens, this tradition points to an ancient, empirical understanding of resonance, the principle that a vibration can influence matter and energy at a distance. It demonstrates a long-held belief that sound is not merely something we hear, but something we can feel and be fundamentally affected by on a physical level. Even the myths and legends of these cultures are saturated with the concept of sound as a tangible, creative, and sometimes destructive force. Greek mythology is filled with stories that attribute literal world-shaping power to music and voice. The most famous example is Orpheus, the legendary musician whose lyre playing was so beautiful and potent that it could charm wild beasts, make trees and rocks dance, and even sway the hearts of the gods of the underworld to nearly achieve the impossible: the return of his wife, Eurydice, from the dead. This is more than a simple parable about the beauty of music. It's a metaphorical narrative about vibration's power to manipulate the physical world and transcend natural law. Similarly, the myth of the sirens tells of a song so compelling and resonant that it could lure sailors to their doom, overpowering their reason and will with its irresistible frequency. These cross-cultural threads, from the architectural genius of the Greeks to the meditative tools of the Tibetans and the powerful metaphors of their mythologies, paint a compelling picture. They reveal that the idea of wielding sound for practical and transformative purposes was a widespread and deeply ingrained concept in the ancient world. This broader context makes the possibility of Druidic sonic levitation far less outlandish. It suggests that we are not looking for a magical anomaly, but for a potential technological peak within a known spectrum of ancient understanding. If other cultures were consciously designing spaces to manipulate sound waves and crafting instruments to alter human consciousness, is it so difficult to believe that the Druids, the renowned scholars of their age, could have refined this knowledge even further? They could have been the ones who cracked the code, moving beyond using sound to influence the mind, and instead using it to command the very stones of the earth. While the Romans sought to erase the Druids, and time has obscured their deepest secrets, the echoes of their world are not entirely silent. if we listen closely to the fragments they left behind, in the accounts of their enemies, in the enduring bardic traditions, and in the very instruments they crafted, we begin to hear a recurring theme, a profound and intentional relationship with sound. This wasn't mere music for celebration. It was a sophisticated toolkit for altering reality, connecting with the divine, and potentially commanding the physical world. The most direct evidence we have for this sonic focus comes from the very people who worked to eliminate them. Roman historians, like the meticulous Pliny the Elder, documented Druidic rituals with a mixture of awe and disdain. They described ceremonies filled with rhythmic chanting and invocations, not as unstructured singing, but as precise, formulaic recitations. These chants were believed to hold inherent power, capable of blessing crops, healing the sick, or cursing enemies. The words themselves were thought to be vessels of energy, and their correct pronunciation, rhythm, and pitch were absolutely essential to their effectiveness. This points to a detailed understanding of how specific vocal patterns could produce a desired effect, a principle that aligns with the modern concept of sonic resonance, the idea that a vibration can influence other matter vibrating at the same frequency. Beyond ritual chanting, the Druidic class included the bards, who were far more than simple entertainers. Their training was just as rigorous as that of the other Druids, requiring them to memorize thousands of verses, complex genealogies, and epic histories. The recitation of these poems was a performance art steeped in sonic power. A bard's delivery involved specific tonalities, cadences, and rhythms designed to captivate an audience, stir emotions, and even impart hidden knowledge through the very vibration of their voice. The legendary concept of a bardic curse wasn't just about speaking ill of someone. It was believed to be a potent act of sonic magic where the carefully crafted words, delivered with the right resonant frequency, could bring about actual misfortune. This tradition suggests a deep, practical knowledge of how sound waves interact with the human psyche and perhaps the environment itself. Perhaps the most haunting and tangible artifact of their sonic world is the carnyx. This was no ordinary instrument. It was a massive, vertical bronze war trumpet, often standing over 2 meters tall, crowned with a bell shaped like the head of a boar, wolf, or serpent. When blown, it didn't produce a melodic tune, but a deep, rasping, otherworldly drone that was designed to be heard for miles across a battlefield. Classical authors described its sound as terrifying, a metallic roar that could shatter the morale of an enemy army before the fighting even began. But its use may have extended far beyond psychological warfare. The carnyx was likely a sacred instrument used in ceremonies, its unique vibrational frequency chosen to open gateways to the spirit world or to attune participants to a specific state of consciousness. The choice of an animal-headed bell wasn't merely decorative. It may have been a deliberate acoustic design to shape and project its powerful, disorienting sound in a particular way, much like a modern speaker cabinet. This collection of evidence, the precise ritual chants, the powerful bardic traditions, and the strategically terrifying carnyx paints a picture of a culture that didn't just use sound. They studied it, categorized it, and harnessed its properties with intention. They understood its power to influence mind, matter, and spirit. For a people who observed the natural world with such razor-sharp acuity, the vibrational energy of sound would have been as real and tangible as the wind or the rain. They would have noticed how a specific note could cause a surface to tremble, or how a rhythmic drumbeat could synchronize the hearts of a crowd. It is within this context that the incredible idea of sonic levitation moves from the realm of pure fantasy into the space of a lost applied science, a natural extension of a philosophy that saw sound not as a fleeting noise, but as a fundamental and malleable force of creation. So if the Druids did possess a technology to move massive stones with sound, what would that actually look like from a scientific perspective? While it seems like magic, the principles behind what we now call acoustic levitation are grounded in real, demonstrable physics. At its core, it's all about harnessing the invisible yet immensely powerful force of sound waves. Think of sound not as something you just hear, but as a physical pressure, a shove of energy moving through the air. When you speak, you're literally pushing air molecules together and pulling them apart, creating waves of high and low pressure that travel outward. Now, imagine coordinating hundreds of voices or instruments to create a precise, unified wave pattern. This is where the real magic of modern science begins to mirror the ancient legends. The key to making an object float in mid-air lies in creating what's known as a standing wave. Picture the calm, perfect stillness you sometimes see in the very center of a rushing river, a spot where the chaotic currents somehow cancel each other out and create a pocket of tranquility. A standing wave is the acoustic version of that phenomenon. It's created when two sound waves of the exact same frequency move toward each other and interfere. At specific points called nodes, the peaks and troughs of these waves perfectly cancel each other's energy out. The result is a series of silent, stationary points of zero pressure, suspended within a raging storm of sound. It is at these precise nodal points that small objects can be captured and held aloft, trapped in an invisible cage of acoustic force. The force that actually does the lifting is called acoustic radiation pressure. This isn't a gentle nudge, it's a powerful enough push to overcome gravity itself for small, lightweight objects. In laboratory settings today, scientists use precisely calibrated arrays of speakers to generate these standing waves. They've successfully levitated everything from tiny beads of water and living ants to small components of electronics and even droplets of liquid antacids, all without any physical contact. The effect is mesmerizing to watch. A small particle hovers effortlessly in a predetermined spot in the air, appearing to defy all logic until you remember it's being masterfully manipulated by an invisible field of energy we normally associate with noise. But here's the crucial leap from laboratory curiosity to megalithic mystery. Modern experiments require immense precision and, critically, a tremendous amount of concentrated energy to leviate even these small, light objects. The power needed increases exponentially with the size and weight of the target. To lift something the size of a Stonehenge sarsen stone, which can weigh 25 tons or more, would require a sonic energy field of almost unimaginable scale and stability, a coordinated force that would likely be deafening and potentially lethal to any unprotected person standing nearby. This presents the breathtaking paradox at the heart of the theory. If the Druids achieved this, they weren't just dabbling in simple acoustics. They had somehow unlocked a profound and sophisticated mastery over vibrational physics that we are still struggling to comprehend with our advanced technology. They would have needed to find a way to generate these waves with an efficiency and power that we can't yet replicate outside of highly controlled, small-scale environments. This gap between what we can do and what the legend suggests they did is what transforms this idea from a simple historical footnote into a captivating technological puzzle that challenges our understanding of both the past and the laws of physics. These ancient stories and songs passed down through generations of bards are far more than simple fables. They are a cultural memory, a whisper of a time when the line between myth and technology was blurred. To find evidence of sonic mastery, we must turn to these legends, listening not for historical fact, but for the hidden truths they might encode. The Celtic mythological tradition is rich with tales that defy normal physics, where objects move by command and the human voice holds tangible power. One of the most striking examples comes from the Welsh Mabinogion, a collection of some of the earliest Brythonic myths. In the story of the giant king, Bran the Blessed, we are told of a magical stone floor in his otherworldly hall. This was no ordinary floor. It was described as a surface that would instantly tilt and tip any liar who stood upon it, hurling them into a corner. While presented as a supernatural truth detector, this description is incredibly evocative of a surface whose level is controlled not by mechanics, but by an unseen force. a force perhaps activated or manipulated by the intention or voice of those present, a primitive legend for a technology that could control the orientation of stone. Another compelling thread is found in the vast body of Irish mythology, particularly in the tales of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the godlike people said to have inhabited Ireland before the arrival of the Celts. They are consistently described as masters of magic and incredible arts, and their most famous artifacts were 4 great treasures they brought with them to Ireland. One of these was the Lia Fáil, the Stone of Destiny, which stood at Tara and was said to cry out with a human voice when the true High King of Ireland stood upon it. This notion of a stone emitting sound is a direct reversal of the levitation concept. Instead of sound moving stone, the stone itself produces a powerful, resonant sound. This suggests a deep cultural association between megaliths and acoustic phenomena, a belief that stones were not inert objects but could be imbued with or responsive to vibrational energy. The legend frames the stone as an oracle, but its core mechanic is sonic. Perhaps the most direct parallel comes from the widespread folklore surrounding the construction of ancient monuments across Britain and Ireland. Countless local legends attached to specific stone circles and burial chambers tell a very similar story, that the massive stones were not dragged into place by thousands of men, but were moved by magic. The specific details often involve a skilled enchanter, a witch, or a druid who could make the stones become weightless. In some versions from Cornwall and Wales, the stones are said to have been flown through the air to their final resting place. A common folktale motif claims the stones were so light during their magical transport that they could be carried in a woman's apron. While these are charming stories, their persistent and specific nature is telling. They represent a collective memory that the official historical narrative of log-rolling and rope-pulling armies of laborers might be incomplete. The folk memory insists that the method was not brute force, but something else entirely, something so extraordinary it could only be explained as enchantment. We also find hints of this power attributed to deities and heroes. The Celtic god Ogmos, known as a champion and a master of eloquence, was sometimes depicted leading men by chains that stretched from his tongue to their ears. This is a powerful metaphor for the persuasive power of speech, but it could also be interpreted on another level, as a symbolic representation of the literal, physical power of sound waves to pull and influence not just minds but matter. The chains are a perfect symbol for the invisible yet unbreakable link created by a resonant frequency. When we analyze these myths, we are not looking for a step-by-step technical manual. We are looking for a cultural fingerprint, a recurring theme that points to a deeply held belief in the tangible power of sound and voice. The legends of floating stones, singing monoliths, and enchanted transport are not proof of sonic levitation, but they are a compelling form of circumstantial evidence. They show that the idea of moving stone with non-physical means was a fundamental part of the Celtic worldview. These stories are the echo of a forgotten science, a science so advanced that when the knowledge was lost, the only vocabulary left to describe it was the language of magic. To truly understand how such a profound technology might have worked, we must step away from the laboratory and into the landscape, visiting the very places the Druids held sacred. These were not arbitrary choices. Each grove, mound, and stone circle was selected with a deep and deliberate intention, often for its unique natural properties. Modern archaeoacoustics, the study of sound in archaeological contexts, has begun to reveal that these sites are not silent ruins but sophisticated acoustic instruments, engineered to interact with sound in extraordinary ways. The very stones seem to remember their purpose, responding to the human voice and the elements with behaviors that defy coincidence. Consider the experience of standing in the heart of a stone circle like Castlerig in Cumbria or the Rollright Stones in Oxfordshire. On a quiet day, if you speak or sing a steady tone, you might notice something peculiar. The sound of your voice doesn't just fade away, it seems to hang in the air a moment longer, clarified or subtly altered by the ring of monoliths surrounding you. This is not imagination. The carefully placed stones act as a series of reflective surfaces, bouncing sound waves back toward the center and creating a complex interference pattern. This would have the effect of amplifying certain frequencies while dampening others, effectively turning the circle into a natural resonator. For a culture that prized the human voice as a source of power, designing a space that enhances and purifies vocal sound would be equivalent to building a spiritual amplifier, a place where chant and invocation could achieve their maximum vibrational impact. The acoustic properties become even more dramatic when we look at underground sites like the Neolithic passage tomb of Newgrange in Ireland, a structure that predates the Druids but was certainly revered and used by them. This massive 5,000-year-old mound is famed for its winter solstice alignment, where a shaft of sunlight illuminates the inner chamber, but its sonic properties are equally fascinating. The long, narrow passageway leading to the central chamber is a masterpiece of acoustic design. Tests have shown that sounds made within the chamber, particularly rhythmic drumming or sustained chanting, are carried and amplified along the stone passageway, projecting them outward with an ethereal, resonant quality. Conversely, sounds from outside are muffled, creating a profound sense of isolation and otherworldliness within. This suggests the architects weren't just building for light, they were designing for sound, creating a space where specific frequencies could be generated and contained for ceremonial use. This principle of amplification and resonance extends to the very materials these sites were built from. Many of the great standing stones, particularly the blue stones used at Stonehenge, have a surprisingly high quartz content. Quartz is a piezoelectric crystal, meaning it generates a small electrical voltage when subjected to mechanical stress or vibration. Think of the humble quartz crystal that powers a modern wristwatch, keeping perfect time through its steady oscillations. Now, imagine an entire circle of such stones, subjected to the powerful vibrations of dozens of people chanting, drumming, or blowing on carnyxes. The theory suggests that these massive monoliths wouldn't just reflect sound. They could potentially absorb vibrational energy and re-emit it, humming along with the ceremony in a literal, physical feedback loop. The entire site could become energized, a battery of resonant frequency that might lower the energy threshold required to influence matter, making the fabled levitation effect far more plausible within such an architecturally and geologically tuned environment. The choice of location further underscores this sonic intention. Many sacred sites are situated near running water, streams, rivers, or waterfalls, or in areas with specific wind patterns that whistle through fissures in the rocks. These natural features provide a constant ambient source of what acoustic engineers call pink noise or white noise, a broad spectrum of sound that can mask other frequencies. This might seem counterintuitive, but for a secretive order guarding powerful knowledge, this natural sonic blanket would be a feature, not a bug. The drone of a waterfall or the howl of the wind would effectively conceal the specific tones and chants of a ceremony from any outsiders who might be listening, ensuring that the core sonic technology remained a protected mystery, its precise frequencies known only to the initiated. The landscape itself was their acoustic partner, providing both power and privacy. When we view these ancient sites not as mute monuments but as active components in a sonic system, the legends of floating stones begin to feel less like fantasy and more like a misunderstood report of advanced physics. The combination of reflective architecture, resonant geological materials, and carefully selected natural soundscapes points to a culture that didn't just stumble upon these properties, they mastered them. They understood how to shape space and stone to harness the energy of sound, turning entire landscapes into instruments for ritual and perhaps for technological application. These places were their laboratories, their cathedrals, and their power plants, all harmonized through the invisible yet utterly tangible force of vibration. This deep connection to sound finds its most potent expression in the Druidic practice of rhythmic chanting and the potential use of sacred mantras. We must move beyond thinking of this as simple singing or prayer. For the initiated, this was likely a precise technological and spiritual discipline, a way of tuning the human instrument to resonate with the fundamental frequency of the world around them. The repetitive, rhythmic nature of these chants was not for memorization alone. It was a tool for altering consciousness and, according to the theory, for generating a coherent and powerful physical force. Imagine a circle of trained individuals, their voices uniting not just in melody, but in perfect harmonic and rhythmic synchronization. This unison would create a powerful, standing wave of sound, a vibrational field that could potentially interact with the environment in tangible ways. The first and most accessible effect of such chanting is on the human mind itself. The sustained repetition of a sound, a tone, or a phrase is a well-documented method for achieving altered states of consciousness. This is a universal principle seen in the repetitive prayers of Tibetan monks, the whirling dances of Sufi dervishes, and the drumming circles of various shamanic traditions. The constant rhythmic input essentially overloads the cognitive processing centers of the brain, allowing the practitioner to bypass ordinary linear thought and enter a state of heightened awareness, deep meditation or trance. For the Druids, this altered state was probably not the end goal, but the starting point. It was the necessary condition for the operator, the individual or group directing the energy, to perceive and interact with the subtle vibrational layers of reality. In this state, they might have been able to feel the resonant frequency of a stone or visualize the sonic field required to manipulate it, making the chanting both the power source and the guidance system for the technology. But the potential goes far beyond subjective experience. From a purely physical standpoint, coordinated chanting is a remarkably efficient way to generate a large amount of acoustic energy. A single voice can project sound, but 50 voices perfectly synchronized create something entirely different. A cumulative wave of vibration that can travel vast distances and exert measurable force. The key lies in the principle of constructive interference. When multiple sound waves are in perfect phase with each other, their peaks and troughs aligning precisely, they combine to form a new wave with a much greater amplitude and therefore much greater power. It's the difference between a single raindrop and a tidal wave. Both are water, but their impact is worlds apart. A Druidic circle, trained for years to chant in absolute unison, could have functioned as a living, breathing array of speakers, capable of projecting a focused beam of sonic energy toward a specific point. This is where the concept of a sacred mantra, a specific sequence of sounds believed to hold intrinsic power, becomes critically important. Many ancient traditions hold that certain words or syllables, when pronounced correctly, vibrate at a frequency that corresponds to specific energies or elements in the cosmos. In Vedic traditions, the syllable Om is considered the primordial sound of creation itself. It is not a word with a meaning, but a vibration that represents the fundamental energy of the universe. The Druids likely had their own equivalent set of power sounds, phonetic keys that acted as sonic catalysts. The Roman accounts of their unintelligible invocations may not have been hearing nonsense, but rather recordings of these precise tonal formulas. Chanting the right mantra would not just be a call to a god. It would be an act of emitting the correct frequency, like tuning a radio to a specific station. The mantra becomes the technology, the exact vibrational code needed to interface with and command a physical material such as stone, compelling it to respond to the acoustic command. While the carnyx stands as the most iconic and fearsome instrument, the Druidic soundscape was far more complex and nuanced, a full orchestra of natural and crafted tools designed to orchestrate reality itself. Beyond the battlefield, within the sacred confines of the grove, other instruments took center stage, each with its own unique voice, symbolic power, and role in their potential sonic technology. The harp, for instance, was not merely an instrument of entertainment, but a revered emblem of cosmic order and harmony. Known as the crwt in Old Irish, its very structure was a metaphor for the universe, the sturdy frame representing the world tree or the pillars of the sky, and the strings symbolizing the interconnected pathways between the earthly and the divine. Crafted from willow for its resonant soundbox and strung with horsehair or bronze, its ethereal, plucked notes were believed to have the power to soothe sorrow, heal sickness, and even call forth spirits from the other world. A skilled harper didn't just play music, they plucked at the very threads of fate, their melodies serving to tune the energy of a ceremonial space, preparing it for the more potent and focused work of chanting or levitation by establishing a baseline harmonic frequency. Equally vital was the drum, the relentless heartbeat of any Druidic ceremony. Made from a hollowed section of oak or yew and topped with a stretched hide, often from a sacred bull or deer, its deep, resonant pulse was far more than a keep of time. The steady, repetitive thrum acted as a powerful driver for achieving collective altered states of consciousness. This phenomenon, known today as auditory driving, is well documented. A consistent rhythmic pattern can synchronize brain waves, lulling participants into a shared trance state where suggestibility and sensory awareness are heightened. In this context, the drum's purpose was to unify the consciousness of the participants, aligning their individual energies into a single, coherent vibrational field. It was the foundational rhythm upon which the more complex frequencies of chant and melody could be layered, its percussive impact potentially also providing the sharp, impulsive energy needed to initiate movement in a stationary object, much like a speaker cone needs an initial impulse to create sound. We must also consider the possibility of more ephemeral instruments, those crafted not from wood and hide but from the landscape itself. The Druids were masters of their environment, and it is plausible they used naturally occurring features as acoustic tools. Striking certain types of rock with specific stones could produce tonal qualities with unique properties. Quartz-rich rocks, for example, would not only ring with a clear tone but, through the piezoelectric effect, could generate small electrical charges with each strike, adding an energetic dimension to the sonic output. Similarly, carefully selected stalactites within a sacred cave could be struck like a giant lithophone, their massive, deep tones resonating through the earth itself. The use of such geo-instruments would further blur the line between the natural and the supernatural, making the entire world participant in their sonic rituals. The symbolic meaning of each instrument was inextricably linked to its function. The carnyx, with its animal-headed bell, connected the user to the primal power and wisdom of the beast it represented, channeling that raw, untamed energy into its terrifying blast. The harp's harmonious strings reflected the Druidic pursuit of cosmic balance and truth. The drum, made from a tree and an animal, symbolized the sacred cycle of life and the interconnectedness of all things. When we imagine a levitation ritual, we must therefore picture a sophisticated, multi-layered acoustic event. It would not rely on a single blast from a carnyx, but on a carefully orchestrated symphony of sound. The ceremony might begin with the harp, its gentle notes establishing a sacred atmosphere and a foundational key. The drum would then join in, its unwavering pulse synchronizing the heartbeats and brainwaves of the participants, bringing them into a state of shared focus and receptivity. As the energy built, the chanting would begin, a low, unified drone that resonated with the frequency of the targeted stone. The carnyx might then sound at precise intervals, its powerful, directed blasts of energy acting as a sonic piston, providing the concentrated bursts of acoustic radiation pressure needed to initiate and sustain lift. The entire grove, tuned by its reflective stones and natural acoustics, would amplify and contain this wave of sound, creating a stable standing wave that could cradle the massive monolith, compelling it to yield to the collective will of its masters. Each instrument was a vital component in this proposed technology, a key player in an ancient orchestra conducted to perform the most miraculous of feats, the defiance of gravity itself. Within this intricate symphony of sound, the bard held a place of unparalleled importance, acting as the living library and the master vocal technician of Druidic society. Their role extended far beyond that of a mere storyteller or court entertainer. They were the sacred custodians of history, law, and genealogy, and their primary instrument was the most powerful of all, the human voice, meticulously trained and wielded with intentional precision. A bard's education was famously grueling, spanning up to 12 years of intense oral immersion. They were required to memorize thousands of lines of complex poetry, intricate family lineages stretching back generations, and the entire legal code of their people, all without ever writing a single word down. This was not a simple feat of memory. It was a rigorous discipline in sonic encoding, where information was not stored as abstract data, but was woven into the very rhythm, rhyme, and meter of verse to ensure its perfect preservation and recall. The performance of these poems was itself a form of applied acoustics. A bard's delivery involved specific tonalities, cadences, and resonant pitches, each chosen to maximize the emotional and psychological impact on the audience. The rise and fall of their voice could hold a hall spellbound, stir warriors to courage, or reduce listeners to tears. This power was believed to be so potent that a bard's satire was feared as a literal weapon. A well-crafted poem of mockery, delivered with the right resonant contempt, was thought to bring blisters to the face of its subject or even cause physical misfortune. This concept of a bardic curse moves beyond metaphor and hints at a cultural belief that sound waves, when shaped by expert intention, could produce tangible physical effects, influencing not just the mind but the very body of the listener. It is within this context that we can speculate about their most profound function, the potential encoding of technical knowledge within their songs. The rhythmic, repetitive structure of epic poems and chants is an incredibly effective mnemonic device, a time-tested method for preserving complex information across centuries. What if the verses describing the magical construction of a king's hall or the flight of a hero's spear contained more than just heroic imagery? They could have served as a covert repository for the precise sonic formulas, the harmonic sequences, or the rhythmic patterns believed to be necessary for levitation. The specific number of syllables in a line, the repetition of a certain vowel sound, or the cadence of a refrain might not have been poetic flourish but technical data, a set of acoustic instructions passed down through generations under the guise of myth and legend. In this light, the bard becomes more than a historian. They become a technologist in disguise, the keeper of a forbidden science encrypted in art. Their songs were the hard drives of the ancient world, and their trained voices were the players that could access that data. The enchanting beauty of their performance was the perfect camouflage for a dangerous and powerful knowledge, ensuring it survived in plain sight long after the last Druidic groves had fallen silent. Their legacy suggests that the most potent magic often hides not in secret grimoires, but in the stories we choose to sing again and again. While our journey so far has woven together myth, legend, and modern acoustics, we must now turn to the most direct and yet most complicated sources available, the words of the enemies who sought to eradicate the Druids. To understand what these classical authors said, we must first understand the lens through which they were looking. Julius Caesar, in his commentaries on the Gallic Wars, provides one of the most detailed, though heavily biased, accounts. As a conquering general, his primary objective was to justify his military campaigns to the Senate back in Rome, and a key part of that justification was painting the Celts as barbaric and their leaders as a threatening alien priesthood. Caesar describes the Druids as immensely powerful, the ultimate authority in all public and private disputes, and he notes their belief in the transmigration of the soul, a concept he found bizarre. Most intriguingly, he mentions their strict prohibition against committing their teachings to writing, using the Greek alphabet only for other purposes. This single observation is a vital clue. It confirms the culture of extreme secrecy we've discussed, suggesting they guarded a knowledge system they believed was too dangerous to be captured in writing where it could fall into the wrong hands. While Caesar never explicitly mentions levitation, his portrait is of a class so intellectually formidable that they were considered a primary military target, a center of gravity that had to be eliminated to break the spirit of the people. The naturalist Pliny the Elder provides a more tantalizing, though equally problematic, glimpse. In his Natural History, he describes a Druidic ritual involving the harvesting of mistletoe from an oak tree with a golden sickle, a ceremony performed on the 6th day of the moon with great reverence. This account is often dismissed as mere superstition, but let's listen to it with different ears. The specific timing, the 6th day of the moon, suggests a precise astronomical alignment, a moment chosen for its unique energetic properties. The use of a golden sickle is equally telling. Gold is a non-reactive metal. Using it to cut a plant ensures the blade does not contaminate or alter the herb's natural chemistry. This reveals a sophisticated, almost scientific, approach to botanical extraction. It points to a deep empirical understanding of natural materials and the belief that certain actions must be performed at precise times to capture their maximum potency. This mindset of harnessing natural forces at their peak is exactly the kind of thinking that could underlie a technology of sonic manipulation, where the timing of a chant or the material of an instrument was critical to its success. Then we have the historian Tacitus, who offers a chilling, first-hand report of the Roman assault on the Druidic stronghold on the island of Mona, now Anglesey. He describes a scene of terrifying otherness, black-robed women running through the ranks like furies, Druids raising their hands to the sky and screaming dreadful curses, and a battle line of warriors so stunned by this display that they initially stood still, offering their bodies to the enemy's swords. This is not the description of a simple religious ceremony. It is an account of psychological and sonic warfare. The screaming of dreadful curses implies a use of the human voice not for prayer, but as a directed weapon intended to instill paralyzing fear and disorientation. The Roman soldiers, among the most disciplined in the world, were reportedly frozen by this acoustic assault. This suggests the Druids possessed a powerful understanding of how specific vocalizations, their tone, pitch, and intensity, could manipulate human psychology and physiology on a mass scale. If they could command such power over the human body with sound, the leap to influencing physical matter, while immense, becomes a slightly smaller one. However, we must treat these accounts with rigorous skepticism. Each of these authors wrote with a clear agenda: to marvel at the exotic, to justify conquest, or to condemn a competing belief system. They were outsiders looking in, often misunderstanding the rituals they witnessed and filtering everything through a Roman cultural lens that viewed non-Roman practices as inferior or sinister. They were also men of their time, blending observation with rumor and hearsay. A Roman soldier might witness a complex ceremony involving chanting and the movement of a large object, and later report that the Druids made the stone fly with their shouts, a simplified and mythologized version of an event he could not comprehend. The lack of any first-hand Druidic writings means we are forever seeing them in a distorted mirror, held up by their adversaries. Yet, even within this bias, a consistent pattern emerges from these texts. The Druids were not simple priests. They were masters of ceremony, wielders of formidable knowledge, and practitioners of a potent art that used voice, ritual, and precise timing to produce effects that baffled and frightened one of the greatest empires in history. Their accounts, for all their flaws, give us the historical anchor point for the legends, confirming that something extraordinary was happening in the misty groves of the ancient world. And so we arrive at the stones themselves, the most enduring and enigmatic monuments to this lost knowledge. Of all the ancient sites whispered to be linked to sonic mastery, none captures the imagination quite like Stonehenge. This colossal ring of sarsen and bluestones, standing silently on the Salisbury Plain, has puzzled historians, archaeologists, and engineers for centuries. The conventional explanation of its construction involves an army of laborers using log rollers, rope, and sheer brute force to drag these multi-ton stones across hundreds of miles. Yet, even with our modern engineering understanding, replicating such a feat with Neolithic technology presents staggering difficulties, leaving a lingering question mark over the official story and inviting us to consider more extraordinary possibilities. The mystery deepens when we consider the blue stones, the smaller inner circle of stones. Their geological fingerprint traces them all the way to the Preseli Hills in Wales, a distance of over 150 miles. Transporting 80 of these stones, each weighing up to 4 tons, across such a vast and varied landscape navigating rivers, forests, and mountains would have been a logistical nightmare of epic proportions, a generations-long project requiring a level of coordination and effort that seems almost incomprehensible. This immense challenge is the very cradle of the sonic levitation theory. The local folklore of the region offers an alternative narrative, one that seems far less impossible to the modern ear tuned to the legends. These old tales don't speak of endless toil, they speak of magic. They claim the stones were not dragged, but were instead carried through the air to their final resting place, a feat accomplished by the skilled enchantment of a powerful wizard or the collective will of a Druidic order. Could this folk memory be a simplified retelling of a real, albeit lost, technological process? Modern science is now beginning to listen to these ancient stones in a new way, and what they are hearing is astonishing. Researchers in the field of archaeoacoustics have conducted numerous experiments at Stonehenge and other megalithic sites like Newgrange and Carnyx in France. They've discovered that these structures possess remarkable acoustic properties. The great sarsen stones of Stonehenge, for instance, are not just passive markers. Their hard, dense surfaces are highly reflective of sound. When a drum is beaten or a horn is blown inside the circle, the sound waves bounce off these immense slabs, creating a complex reverberation that can make a single source seem to come from multiple directions at once. This generates a disorienting, immersive soundscape that can profoundly alter a person's state of consciousness, making it the perfect environment for ritual and ceremony. But the potential applications go far beyond the psychological. Some experiments have shown that within the center of a stone circle, certain frequencies can create standing waves, those same pockets of acoustic energy that modern scientists use to levitate small objects. While no one is claiming a stone circle can lift a 20-ton block, these findings suggest the builders may have understood these principles intuitively. They may have designed these spaces to amplify and contain specific resonant frequencies, effectively turning the entire site into a giant sonic catalyst. The precise placement of the lintels atop the sarsens, creating a continuous ring, might not have been merely for architectural stability. It could have served as a waveguide, shaping and directing sound energy in a specific way across the center of the circle. When you stand within Stonehenge and clap your hands, you might hear a brief, sharp echo. But when researchers used electronic speakers to generate a constant, low-frequency tone akin to a Druidic chant or the drone of a carnyx, they documented something else entirely. The sound didn't just echo, it resonated, hanging in the air with a sustained presence that felt almost physical. This suggests the circle was engineered to respond to the very types of sound the Druids were documented as using. The site itself becomes an instrument, and the act of construction may not have been separate from the ceremony, but a part of it, a ritual where the unified voice of the community, focused through the acoustic lens of the stones, was the very tool used to place them. The stones and the sound become part of a single, integrated technology, a forgotten science where architecture and acoustics were one and the same. This concept of sound as a foundational force brings us to one of the most fascinating and universal ideas in the history of mystical traditions, the belief in a word of power. This is the notion that certain specific sounds, syllables, or phrases are not just symbols for things, but contain an inherent generative energy within their very vibration. It's the difference between reading a recipe for a cake and possessing a single word that can actually conjure the cake into existence. For the Druids, whose entire knowledge system was oral, this wasn't an abstract philosophy. It was likely the very bedrock of their practice, the secret key they guarded so fiercely. While we have no first-hand grimoire listing these potent words, we can find compelling echoes of this belief by looking at other ancient cultures that held similar convictions. Consider the ancient Egyptian concept of Heka, which is often translated simply as magic, but meant something far more profound. Heka was the underlying power that brought the gods into being and sustained the cosmos. The Egyptians believed this force could be accessed and directed through the correct use of sound, specifically through the spoken word in ritual. The most powerful example of this is the myth of creation itself, where the god Ptah brings the entire universe into existence merely by speaking its names. For them, to know the true name of a god, a person, or even a disease was to have absolute power over it, because the name was not a label, but the very vibrational essence of the thing. This is a stunning parallel to the Druidic insistence on the precise pronunciation of chants and invocations, suggesting a shared, ancient understanding that reality could be rewired through sound. An even more precise comparison can be drawn with the Hindu and Tibetan Buddhist traditions of bija mantras. Bija means seed in Sanskrit, and these mantras are considered to be seed syllables, succinct, potent sounds that contain the entire essence of a much larger concept or deity. The most famous of these is Om, revered as the primordial sound from which all of creation manifested. But there are many others, each with a specific vibrational quality and purpose. The syllable Ram is associated with fire and transformation. Hum is used for protection and dissolution of negativity, and Shrim is connected to abundance and beauty. Practitioners don't just recite these sounds, they meditate upon them, feeling their vibration resonate within their own bodies to effect internal change, operating on the principle that the microcosm of the self and the macrocosm of the universe are connected through these fundamental frequencies. So what might a Druidic word of power have sounded like? We are, of course, venturing into the realm of informed speculation, but the clues left in language and folklore are tantalizing. Some scholars point to the profound significance of the vowel in early Celtic languages. In many ancient Irish and Welsh poems, certain lines are structured around alliteration and internal rhyme using specific vowel sounds, a technique that seems designed more for sonic impact than literal meaning. The sound, being open and primal, may have been considered a fundamental tone of creation or connection. Other candidates could be the names of the gods themselves, which were likely not spoken lightly. A name like the Dagda, the good god, or Lugus, the master of all arts, wouldn't just be a title. Uttered with correct intention and resonance, it might have been a call to summon the very attribute that God represented. We might also look to the few words that have survived in folklore as having protective or potent qualities. The Irish word bendacht, meaning a blessing, or the Welsh hud, meaning magic or enchantment, are not just descriptions of concepts, they could be the very vessels of that power. Imagine a circle of chanters, not simply asking for a blessing, but rhythmically intoning the word bendacht itself, focusing their will into the vibration of that specific combination of sounds, believing that by doing so, they are generating and projecting the energy of blessing directly into the world. This transforms language from a tool of communication into a technology of manifestation. The Roman accounts of hearing barbarous and unintelligible invocations from the Druids suddenly make new sense. They weren't hearing a foreign language, but perhaps listening to the repetitive, resonant chanting of these very words of power, the secret sonic codes that they believed could interface with the fabric of reality itself. These rituals were not isolated performances, but carefully orchestrated events designed to harness the vibrational energy of the natural world, aligning the community with the turning of the seasons and the cycles of the cosmos. The most significant of these were the great fire festivals that marked the transitions between the light and dark halves of the year: Imbolc, Beltane, Lughnasadh, and most profoundly, Samhain. Imagine the scene at Samhain, celebrated on what we now call Halloween, when the veil between the worlds was believed to be at its thinnest. The community would gather on a high hill or within a sacred grove, the darkness punctuated only by the flames of a massive central bonfire. As the fire roared, the Druids would begin a low, rhythmic chant, a deep droning hum that grew in intensity as more voices joined. This wasn't a melody but a sustained tone, a collective vocalization aimed at creating a unified vibrational field. The purpose was twofold: to provide a beacon of sonic energy for benevolent spirits and to create a protective barrier against malevolent forces. The intense, focused sound, amplified by the circle of participants and the reflective properties of the surrounding trees or stones, would have physically vibrated through the bodies of everyone present, inducing a shared trance state and making the mystical feel tangibly real. In such an atmosphere, the stories of the Shia, the fairy folk, moving between worlds might have been accompanied by the very real sensation of the earth humming in response to the sacred sound. Healing ceremonies presented another critical application of this sonic science, where the human body itself was the subject of the vibrational intervention. The Druids were renowned as physicians, and their methods likely involved far more than herbal remedies. A person suffering from an illness or spiritual malaise would be brought to a specially prepared space, perhaps a secluded clearing by a stream whose constant murmur provided a blanket of natural sound. The healing Druid, possibly accompanied by assistants, would begin by diagnosing not just the physical symptoms but the energetic state of the individual. The treatment might then involve the careful application of specific sounds. Using their own voice, a small harp, or a collection of tuned stones, the healer would produce frequencies aimed at resonating with the patient's body. The theory would be that disease was a form of dissonance, a part of the body or spirit vibrating at an incorrect frequency. The healer's role was to sing the correct note to reintroduce harmony and literally vibrate the illness out of existence. The low, resonant hum might be used to soothe deep pain or shatter kidney stones, while a higher, clearer tone could be for cleansing wounds or sharpening the mind. The patient, surrounded by these carefully chosen vibrations, would experience a profound somatic therapy, their own cells entrained to the healthy frequency. This practice finds a direct parallel in modern sound therapy, which uses tools like tuning forks to reduce stress and promote healing, suggesting the Druids possessed an empirical, if not fully scientific, understanding of sound's impact on human biology. The initiation of a new Druid or bard would have been the most secretive and potent of all sonic rituals, a multi-stage process designed to test the candidate's mental, physical, and spiritual fortitude while imparting the deepest mysteries. After years of memorization and study, the initiate would be led blindfolded into a profound sensory deprivation experience, perhaps deep within a cave or a confined underground chamber. Here, in absolute silence and darkness, their own heartbeat and breath would become deafening. After an unknown period, the silence would be shattered not by a roar, but by a single, pure note from a carnyx or a harp, its vibration piercing through the stillness and shaking the initiate to their core. This sound was a key designed to break down ordinary consciousness and open the mind to new perceptions. Following this, the senior Druids would begin a complex polyrhythmic chant, their voices weaving together in intricate patterns that created a disorienting and immersive soundscape. The candidate, deprived of sight, would have their entire reality defined by this overwhelming wave of sound, which could induce visions, auditory hallucinations, and a complete dissolution of the self. It was within this controlled sonic chaos that the final secrets, the powerful mantras, the precise frequencies for influencing matter, the true names of the gods, might be whispered directly into the ear of the initiate, encoded into their psyche during a state of heightened suggestibility. This was how the most dangerous knowledge was transferred, not on a page, but through a vibrational experience that forged an unbreakable neural connection between the sound and its meaning, ensuring it could never be stolen or forgotten. This culture of extreme secrecy raises a profound question that echoes across centuries. What constitutes forbidden knowledge in our modern world, where information is freely traded and instantly accessible? The idea of deliberately concealing a powerful technology is almost incomprehensible. Yet for the Druids, and indeed for many ancient cultures, certain understandings were considered too potent, too dangerous for general use. This wasn't about hoarding power for its own sake, but about a deeply ingrained belief that some forces, if misapplied, could unravel the very fabric of society and the natural order. The decision to keep such knowledge secret was likely a heavy responsibility, a sacred duty to protect both the people and the knowledge itself from corruption. We can break down the reasons for this secrecy into three interconnected layers: societal stability, spiritual sanctity, and the balance of power. On a societal level, imagine a technology that could move mountains literally. If the power to levitate massive stones with sound was common knowledge, it could have dismantled the existing social structure. The authority of the Druids, and by extension the chieftains and kings they counseled, was built upon their unique mastery of the natural and spiritual worlds. If every village could effortlessly construct impregnable fortresses or rearrange the landscape, it would have led to chaos, constant warfare, and a complete loss of centralized control. The knowledge was protected to maintain a stable, functional civilization. The spiritual reasons run even deeper. For the Druids, the world was alive with spirit and energy. Their practices were about maintaining harmony with these unseen forces, not exploiting them. The use of sacred sound in rituals was likely seen as a form of communion, a way to align human intention with the vibrational fabric of the universe. To use this same principle for purely practical or ego-driven construction projects could have been viewed as a profound sacrilege, a violation of a sacred covenant that would invite disaster. This reflects a world where technology and spirituality were inseparable. To wield such power required not just technical skill, but also moral and spiritual purity. It was knowledge that demanded wisdom from its wielder. Finally, we must consider the raw political dimension. Controlling access to such a transformative technology granted the Druids immense soft power. Their ability to advise on where to build a fortress, a temple, or a ceremonial site, and potentially to oversee its construction through extraordinary means, made them indispensable. This secured their position as the ultimate arbiters in their society, immune from the petty squabbles of tribal warfare. Their secrecy was a shield, ensuring that this power could not be turned against the people or used by a tyrant for conquest. In this light, the Roman eradication of the Druidic order takes on a new dimension. It wasn't merely a clash of religions, but a targeted strike to permanently seize and nullify a source of power that even the mighty Roman Empire could not replicate or control, effectively silencing a competing technological and spiritual authority forever. Today's scientific exploration of acoustic levitation offers a fascinating lens through which we might re-examine these ancient legends. In laboratories around the world, researchers are not only confirming that sound can move matter, but are actively developing the technology for incredible modern applications. Scientists use precisely calibrated arrays of speakers to generate what are known as standing wave patterns. At the points where these sound waves intersect and cancel each other out, they create silent pockets of acoustic force called nodes. It is at these precise points that small objects, from droplets of liquid to living ants and even tiny electronic components, can be trapped and suspended in mid-air, completely defying gravity without any physical contact. The effect is both beautiful and bewildering to witness, as particles dance and float in an invisible cage of vibrational energy. This isn't theoretical physics, it is a working technology with real-world uses, from handling highly reactive chemicals without contamination to developing new methods for targeted drug delivery within the human body. The underlying principle that makes this possible is acoustic radiation pressure, the physical force that sound waves exert on surfaces. While we typically think of sound as something we hear, it is fundamentally a pressure wave moving through a medium like air or water. When these waves are focused and controlled with extreme precision, their collective push can become powerful enough to overcome gravity for small, lightweight objects. The key to scaling this effect lies in the amplitude or intensity of the sound and the precise coordination of the wave frequencies. To levitate something larger and heavier requires an exponential increase in acoustic energy, presenting a significant engineering challenge that modern science is still working to overcome. This creates a captivating paradox. We can effortlessly float a tiny bead with a sophisticated electronic setup, but the prospect of lifting a stone weighing tons with sound alone remains firmly in the realm of theory, pushing the boundaries of our current understanding of physics. This stark limitation is what makes the Druidic hypothesis so compelling and so contentious. If ancient peoples did indeed move megaliths with sound, they would have needed to accomplish a feat that still eludes our most advanced technology. How could they possibly generate the immense, focused sonic power required without amplifiers or electricity? This is where the idea of natural amplification and collective human effort becomes critical. We must consider the possibility that the Druids didn't use technology as we know it, but instead mastered a form of biomechanical amplification. A large group of highly trained individuals, chanting in perfect unison at a specific resonant frequency, could generate a formidable and coherent wave of acoustic energy. When this unified human output was combined with the natural acoustics of a carefully selected site, a ring of highly reflective standing stones acting as a sound lens, or a valley formation that naturally focused and amplified vibrations, the total effect could have been far greater than the sum of its parts. Furthermore, the materials themselves may have played an active role. Many megalithic stones, like the blue stones at Stonehenge, have a high quartz content. Quartz is a piezoelectric material, meaning it generates a small electrical charge when mechanically stressed by vibration. A circle of such stones, subjected to the powerful, rhythmic vibrations of chanting and drumming, might have done more than just reflect sound. They could have transduced it, absorbing the acoustic energy and re-emitting it, effectively becoming a ring of passive amplifiers that hummed in sympathetic resonance with the ceremony. This would create a self-reinforcing feedback loop of vibrational energy, potentially lowering the threshold of power needed to influence the stones within the circle. The entire site would become a living, breathing instrument, tuned to a frequency that could interact with matter in ways we are only beginning to model. This perspective shifts the question from did they have advanced technology to did they possess an advanced understanding of natural principles. The Druids were, above all, meticulous observers of the natural world. Over generations, they would have noticed how a specific musical note could cause a crystal to vibrate on a rock ledge, or how a certain rhythm made by footsteps could cause a loose slab to tremble. Through patient observation and experimentation, they could have empirically deduced the principles of resonance and harmonic frequency without ever formulating the mathematical equations we use today. Their process would have been one of intuitive science, refined through ritual and ceremony. A successful levitation might not have been a repeatable, on-demand event like flipping a switch, but a rare and powerful culmination of perfect conditions, the right number of voices, the correct frequency, the ideal atmospheric pressure, and the precise phase of the moon, all aligning to create a momentary window where the impossible became possible. While we may never find a carved instruction manual for building a sonic crane, the convergence of modern science and ancient legend invites us to expand our definition of what is possible. Contemporary research into acoustic levitation doesn't disprove the ancient accounts. Instead, it provides a physical framework that makes them seem less like fantasy and more like a lost chapter in humanity's long quest to harness the forces of nature. It suggests that the Druids' greatest achievement may not have been magic, but a profound and forgotten science of vibration, a testament to the power of the human voice and the hidden potential of the world around us. This emerging field of research, known as Archaeoacoustics, gives us a powerful new way to listen to the past. It moves beyond simply looking at ruins and instead focuses on hearing them, using sophisticated audio equipment to measure the acoustic properties of ancient spaces. What researchers are discovering is that many of these sites are not silent monuments but sophisticated sonic instruments, deliberately engineered to interact with sound in specific and often dramatic ways. For a culture like the Druids, who revered the human voice and used sound as a central pillar of their rituals, these findings are nothing short of revolutionary, transforming our understanding of their capabilities from primitive superstition to potential acoustic engineering. One of the most compelling studies in this field was conducted at the ancient site of Newgrange in Ireland. This massive 5,000-year-old passage tomb, a site certainly revered by the Druids long after its construction, is world-famous for its precise alignment with the winter solstice sunrise. However, when acoustic engineers turned their microphones toward its long, narrow entrance passage, they uncovered another layer of genius. They found that this stone corridor acts as a perfect waveguide, a natural amplifier for sound generated within the inner chamber. Rhythmic drumming or sustained chanting from the central altar would be carried and focused down the passageway, projecting it outward with an otherworldly, resonant quality that would have been heard far beyond the entrance. Conversely, the structure effectively muffles sounds from the outside world, creating a profound sense of isolation and sacred separation for those inside. This proves the architects weren't just designing for light and ceremony. They were meticulously shaping stone to control and magnify sound itself. Similar acoustic marvels have been measured at above-ground sites like the stone circle of Castlereagh in England. Here, the great standing stones don't just form a silent ring, they create a complex acoustic environment. The broad, flat surfaces of the monoliths are highly reflective. When sound is produced within the circle, these stones bounce the waves back toward the center, creating a swirling interplay of echoes and reverberations that can make a single voice seem to come from multiple directions at once. This doesn't just create a disorienting effect, it can also amplify certain frequencies while canceling out others, effectively tuning the space to respond best to specific tones, much like the body of a violin or guitar shapes the notes of its strings. For a Druidic ceremony, this would have turned the entire circle into a colossal resonator, a spiritual amplifier where the power of their chants and invocations could be maximized. Perhaps the most tantalizing discovery from Archaeoacoustics is the documented presence of standing waves at certain megalithic sites. As we discussed, these are the stationary points of acoustic energy where modern scientists successfully levitate small objects. Researchers have generated low-frequency tones, similar to the drone of a carnyx or a deep male chant, within the confines of these stone circles and used sensitive instruments to map the resulting soundscape. In several cases, they have identified clear patterns of these standing waves, areas where the sound pressure is significantly higher and remains stable. While these modern experiments use electronic speakers and are not powerful enough to move anything but dust particles, their existence is profoundly significant. It demonstrates that the very architecture of these circles is naturally conducive to creating the precise acoustic phenomena required for levitation. The ancient builders, through intuition, observation, and generational experimentation, may have understood how to shape space to achieve this effect on a much grander scale using human voices alone. These findings fundamentally change the conversation about the Druids and their relationship with sound. we are no longer talking about a vague belief in magical chanting, but about a sophisticated, empirical understanding of vibrational physics. They were not merely priests hoping their songs would be heard by the gods. They were, in effect, the first audio engineers, consciously designing spaces that would work in harmony with their rituals to produce specific, powerful physical effects. The choice of location, the selection of stone with specific reflective or piezoelectric properties, and the precise placement of each monolith were all part of a grand design to harness the invisible force of sound. Archaeoacoustics provides the hard data that bridges the gap between ancient legend and modern science, suggesting that the stories of stones moved by song may be the folk memory of a lost technology, a science of sacred sound that we are only just beginning to hear again. If the Druids did possess a method for sonic levitation, how might it have actually functioned in practice? The theories that attempt to answer this question move beyond simple chanting and into the realm of sophisticated physics and coordinated human effort, painting a picture of a potential technology that was both incredibly advanced and deeply integrated with the natural world. One compelling idea centers on the principle of resonant frequency. Every object in the universe, from a tiny grain of sand to a massive stone monolith, has a natural frequency at which it vibrates. If you can match that frequency exactly with an external sound source, you can cause the object to vibrate in sympathy, a phenomenon known as resonance. In modern engineering, this is a well-understood force. It's why soldiers break step when marching across a bridge, to avoid the rhythmic vibrations from matching the bridge's resonant frequency and potentially causing catastrophic structural failure. For the Druids, the first step in any levitation ritual would have been to identify the unique resonant frequency of the stone they intended to move. This might have been achieved through careful experimentation, perhaps by tapping the stone with specific quartz-rich rocks and listening to the tone it produced, or through deep meditative observation to intuitively sense its vibrational signature. Once the correct frequency was identified, the challenge became generating a sound wave powerful and stable enough to excite that resonance to an extreme degree. This is where the second theory comes into play, the power of unified group consciousness. A single voice, even a single carnyx, would be insufficient. But a large circle of highly trained individuals chanting in perfect rhythmic and harmonic unison could generate a formidable and coherent wave of acoustic energy. The training of the Druids and bards, with its intense focus on memorization and precise oral delivery, was essentially a decades-long program to create perfect human instruments. When this group achieved a shared, focused state of intention, perhaps entered through the rhythmic driving of drums and the immersive soundscape of the stone circle itself, they could become more than a choir. They could function as a single, living amplifier. Their synchronized voices would create a powerful standing wave of sound, and their collective will would be directed toward a single purpose, compelling the stone to resonate, to vibrate so intensely that its molecular bonds loosened and its effective weight was nullified, making it buoyant within the focused field of acoustic radiation pressure. The landscape itself is theorized to have been the third critical component, acting as a natural amplifier and resonator. This wasn't just about chanting in a pretty forest. It was about utilizing specifically chosen sites with unique acoustic and geological properties. A stone circle positioned within a natural bowl-shaped valley, for instance, would naturally focus and contain sound waves, preventing their energy from dissipating into the air. The placement of the standing stones themselves would have been meticulously planned. Their hard, reflective surfaces would bounce the sound waves back toward the center, creating a complex interference pattern that amplified the desired frequency. Furthermore, many megalithic stones have a high quartz content. Quartz is piezoelectric, meaning it generates a small electrical charge when subjected to mechanical stress or vibration. A circle of such stones, humming in sympathetic resonance with the chanting, might have transduced the acoustic energy, effectively becoming a ring of passive amplifiers that boosted the signal in a self-reinforcing feedback loop. The entire site would become a giant tuned instrument, and the stone at its center would be the note it was designed to play. Some theories venture even further, suggesting that the sound was not the lifting force itself, but the trigger for a different phenomenon. One intriguing hypothesis proposes that the specific resonant frequency was used to counteract the effects of gravity on the stone's local field, a concept that edges into speculative physics. Another suggests that the sound was used to manipulate a separate, unseen energy field that the Druids were attuned to, what we might call telluric or earth energy, using acoustic vibration as a key to unlock a latent force within the landscape itself. While these ideas are more metaphysical, they stem from the consistent Druidic portrayal as masters of natural forces that modern science is still struggling to quantify. Whether the mechanism was purely acoustic or involved a deeper interplay of energies, the unifying thread across all these theories is a vision of the Druids not as magicians but as brilliant intuitive physicists. They are seen as keen observers who decoded the vibrational rules of the universe and learned to collaborate with the landscape and their community to perform wonders that we can only just begin to explain with our current understanding. This remarkable focus on sound as a tool for shaping reality was not unique to the Celtic world. When we cast our gaze across the globe and back through the centuries, we find a startling tapestry of similar traditions, a chorus of ancient cultures that all seem to understand the profound power of vibration. These widespread echoes suggest that the Druids may not have been solitary masters of a forgotten art, but rather one prominent chapter in a much larger, lost history of human interaction with sonic energy. Perhaps the most compelling parallel comes from the other side of the world, high in the Himalayan mountains. Tibetan monks have a long and documented history of using sound in their spiritual practices, most notably through the deep, resonant chanting of sacred texts and the hypnotic drone of their long horns. Their spiritual texts speak of the ability to levitate stones and even entire buildings through the coordinated use of sound. According to their legends, the construction of monasteries in impossibly high, inaccessible locations was achieved not by thousands of laborers, but by small groups of monks who would position themselves around a massive boulder. Using drums and trumpets, they would generate a specific, powerful frequency that would lift the stone and carry it effortlessly up the mountain to its intended place. This account is strikingly similar to the European folktales of stones being flown through the air, suggesting a shared understanding of a principle that transcends geography and culture. Another powerful example emerges from the ancient Phoenician world, at the monumental site of Baalbek in modern-day Lebanon. Here, the ruins of a Roman temple complex are built upon a far older megalithic foundation known as the Trilithon, 3 colossal stone blocks, each weighing an estimated 800 tons, fitted together with breathtaking precision. The conventional explanation of how these stones were quarried, moved, and lifted into place strains credulity even for Roman engineers. Local legend, however, offers a different story. It speaks of a time before the Romans, of a people who possessed a sacred knowledge that allowed them to make the massive stones weightless. The builders would use special instruments to generate a resonant hum, and at the correct pitch, the stones would lose their mass and could be guided into position by a single person. This narrative is almost identical to the Cornish and Welsh folktales attached to Stonehenge, creating a compelling pattern across continents. It points to a recurring theme in the construction of the world's most mysterious ancient sites, a persistent folk memory that insists the method was acoustic, not manual. We find yet another fascinating thread in the traditions of the Pacific. The native Hawaiian culture holds deep reverence for certain volcanic stones believed to possess mana or spiritual energy. There are accounts of kahunas, the Hawaiian priests and keepers of knowledge, using rhythmic chanting and vocalizations to communicate with these stones. The legends describe humming stones or singing stones that would resonate in response to the human voice, and some tales even suggest that the massive stone platforms known as heiaus were constructed with the aid of this sonic connection. While not explicitly about levitation, this tradition reinforces the idea found in the Irish myth of the Lia Fáil, the concept that stones are not inert, but are responsive to and interactive with specific sound frequencies. This global pattern moves beyond coincidence and begins to look like a fragmented yet consistent anthropological record. When we step back to examine these stories from Tibet, Lebanon, Hawaii, and the Celtic world side by side, several crucial common patterns emerge, forming what might be called a blueprint of ancient sonic technology. First, there is the consistent requirement for specialized knowledge. This was never a public spectacle or a common skill. It was always the domain of a priestly, initiated class. The Druids, the monks, the kahunas, who underwent rigorous training to learn the precise methods. Second, there is the universal use of specific instruments or vocal techniques designed to produce a sustained, resonant drone, not a melody. The Tibetan long horn, the Druidic carnyx, and the described instruments of Baalbek all point to the need for a powerful, low-frequency sound wave. Third, and perhaps most importantly, every tradition emphasizes the necessity of collective, synchronized effort. The power never came from a single individual. It always required a coordinated group, chanting or playing in perfect unison, their combined will and focus directed toward a single objective. This suggests that the human element, the focused intention of the operators, was just as critical as the acoustic physics, intertwining consciousness with vibration in a way that modern science is only beginning to explore. These recurring motifs strongly indicate that we are not merely collecting unrelated fairy tales, but are instead looking at the faded fingerprints of a sophisticated and widespread prehistoric understanding of our universe's vibrational nature. For a culture that saw the divine not in distant heavens, but in the whispering leaves and flowing streams around them, the natural world was far more than a backdrop for ritual. It was an active, living partner in their technological and spiritual pursuits. The Druids' entire philosophy was rooted in a profound animism, a belief that every element of nature, every ancient oak, every tumbling river, every gust of wind possessed a spirit and a unique vibrational essence. This wasn't a poetic metaphor, it was a fundamental principle of their science. To harness the power of sound, they wouldn't have sought to dominate these elements with brute force, but to collaborate with them, to weave their sonic practices into the existing vibrational tapestry of the living earth, using its innate properties to amplify their intentions in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. Consider the sacred groves themselves, the preferred sanctuaries for Druidic ceremony. These were not random collections of trees. They were carefully selected stands of specific species, each chosen for its unique acoustic and energetic properties. The mighty oak, revered above all others, was not just a symbol of strength, but a phenomenal natural resonator. Its dense, broad leaves and complex branch structure act as a magnificent acoustic filter, naturally absorbing distracting high-frequency noises like bird calls or rustling undergrowth while allowing the lower, resonant frequencies of chanting and drumming to pass through and circulate within the grove. This created a naturally purified soundscape, a secluded auditory chamber where the focused vibrations of the ceremony could dominate without competition. Similarly, groves of willow, often associated with water and intuition, or stands of yew, known for their longevity and connection to the otherworld, would have each contributed their own subtle acoustic character to the space, shaping the sound in ways that supported specific ritual purposes. Water, in all its forms, was another critical component in this natural sonic toolkit. A ceremony held near a rushing waterfall or a fast-flowing stream benefited from a constant, powerful source of what we now call pink noise, a broad spectrum of sound that masks other frequencies. This natural sonic blanket would have provided acoustic privacy, ensuring the specific tones and chants of a levitation ritual remained a protected secret, their precise frequencies hidden from any unintended ears by the roar of the water. But water's role may have been even more direct. The surface of a still lake or a placid river acts as a near-perfect reflective plane for sound waves. Chanting across such a surface could have created complex interference patterns, potentially doubling the effective acoustic energy or helping to stabilize a standing wave between the singers on the bank and its reflection on the water. Furthermore, the mist rising from a waterfall or a hot spring is packed with millions of tiny water droplets, which are excellent at carrying and transmitting sound vibrations with greater efficiency than dry air. Operating within such a mist-filled environment could have significantly increased the range and power of their sonic projections, turning the very atmosphere into a more conductive medium for their commands. The wind itself, so often personified in Celtic myth, may have been the most elusive yet powerful partner. The Druids were master observers of weather patterns, and they likely understood how to use wind direction and speed to their advantage. A steady, consistent breeze moving through a narrow valley or between specially placed stones could be harnessed to carry and focus sound, acting as a natural directional amplifier to project their frequencies toward a specific stone or altar. Certain geological features, like the narrow entrance to a cave or a naturally occurring stone arch, can create a venturi effect for sound, accelerating and concentrating the vibrations as they pass through the constriction. By positioning themselves intelligently within these natural amplifiers, a small group could generate a sonic effect far greater than their numbers would suggest. Even the time of day was crucial. The cooling air of dusk and dawn creates temperature inversions that can trap sound waves close to the ground, causing them to travel much farther and with greater clarity than they would in the heat of the day. By aligning their most powerful ceremonies with these natural acoustic windows, the Druids could have been leveraging the planet's own atmospheric rhythms to magnify their work. This deep collaboration with nature transforms our image of their technology from a standalone invention to a form of symbiotic bioacoustics. They weren't just using sound on the world, they were learning to use the world to shape their sound. The resonant quality of a specific rock face, the sound-dampening moss on the forest floor, the way frost on a winter morning makes the air more conductive, all of these subtle environmental factors would have been noted, studied, and incorporated into their practices. This approach required a patience and an intimacy with the land that is almost foreign to our modern mindset. It was a technology of relationship, not of extraction. The successful levitation of a stone, therefore, may not have been achieved through sheer sonic power alone, but through the perfect momentary alignment of human intention with a symphony of natural conditions, the right voices, the right frequency, the right trees, the right wind, all converging to create a fleeting opportunity to gently persuade a piece of the earth to momentarily defy its own nature. The Roman conquest of Gaul and Britain was not merely a military campaign. It was a systematic cultural and intellectual genocide aimed squarely at dismantling the very heart of Celtic civilization by eradicating the Druids. When Julius Caesar's legions marched across Europe, they encountered a power structure unlike any other one where the ultimate authority did not reside with a king or a general, but with a class of philosophers, judges, and priests. The Romans, masters of centralized, tangible power, recognized the Druids as the true engine of resistance and cultural identity. Their knowledge was the glue that held the disparate tribes together, and so it became a primary military target. The campaign to silence them was brutal and thorough. Sacred groves, the ancient universities of the Druids, were desecrated and burned. The great stronghold on the Isle of Mona, a last bastion of their order, was stormed by Roman soldiers who cut down the Druids and their followers without mercy, an event Tacitus recorded with a mixture of horror and awe. The Roman objective was clear: to break the spirit of the people by decapitating their intellectual leadership, ensuring no rival system of thought could challenge the supremacy of Rome. In the ashes of this cultural annihilation, we must ask ourselves what was truly lost. The Druidic tradition was exclusively oral. Their most profound understandings were never written down but were instead locked within the minds of the initiated, passed from teacher to student through decades of rigorous training. With the line of succession violently broken, an entire library of knowledge accumulated over centuries of meticulous observation and experimentation vanished in a single generation. We can only speculate on the depth of those secrets, but the threads we've followed suggest a sophisticated science of vibration that viewed sound not as a phenomenon, but as a tangible tool. They likely possessed a detailed map of resonant frequencies, knowing exactly which tonal sequences could maximize the piezoelectric effect in quartz-rich stones, or how to harmonize multiple voices to create a stable acoustic standing wave. This wasn't just theoretical, it would have been a practical, applied technology with precise formulas for the size, shape, and composition of monoliths, and the exact number of trained voices required to influence them. Perhaps the greatest loss was their understanding of the synergy between consciousness and sound. For the Druids, the mind of the operator was not separate from the physical act. Focused intention, achieved through rhythmic chanting and trance states, was likely considered a critical component of the technology. This suggests they had mastered a form of bioacoustics we are only beginning to explore, where human consciousness actively participates in shaping physical reality through vibrational energy. Their rituals were the interface for this technology, a way of tuning both the environment and the participants to a specific purpose. The exact mantras, the sacred words of power that served as sonic keys to unlock material properties, are gone forever. We are left with the haunting echo of their carnyxes and the silent testimony of stones that stand as monuments to a conversation between humanity and the universe that was abruptly and violently cut short. The Roman conquest did more than subjugate a people. It may have extinguished a unique branch of human understanding, leaving us to rediscover millennia later the very principles they might have wielded with effortless grace. The allure of this lost knowledge has not faded with the centuries. Instead, it has ignited a passionate quest among modern researchers, acoustic engineers, and even musicians to test these ancient legends against the rigors of contemporary science. This isn't a pursuit of magic, but a fascinating archaeological experiment, an attempt to reverse engineer a potential technology using the tools we have today. One of the most compelling areas of experimentation involves the recreation and use of ancient instruments, most notably the carnyx. Skilled craftsmen, working from archaeological fragments and depictions on ancient coins, have painstakingly reconstructed these massive bronze war trumpets. When musicians play them, the sound is nothing short of transformative, a deep, rasping, and profoundly unsettling drone that seems to vibrate as much in your chest as in your ears. Researchers have taken these instruments to sites like Stonehenge during the quiet hours of dawn, measuring how their powerful blasts interact with the stone circle. The initial findings are intriguing. The hard surfaces of the sarcens do indeed reflect and amplify the sound, creating complex reverberations and lasting echoes that suggest the architecture is specifically tuned to lower, resonant frequencies. These aren't just musical performances, they are acoustic surveys gathering data on how the very structure of these places shapes and magnifies sound. Beyond single instruments, larger group experiments have been organized to test the power of collective vocalization. Teams of sound therapists, overtone singers, and volunteers have gathered at various megalithic sites to engage in coordinated chanting. The goal is to see if a group of human voices trained to sing in precise unison can generate a measurable standing wave within a stone circle. Using sensitive audio equipment, researchers have been able to map the soundscapes they create. In certain configurations, particularly within smaller, more enclosed circles, they have successfully documented the formation of clear nodal points. those silent pockets of acoustic force where modern labs levitate small objects. While the energy produced is nowhere near sufficient to move a stone, the mere fact that this phenomenon can be reliably generated by human voices in an ancient structure is a profound discovery. It demonstrates that the core physics of the legend is sound, pardon the pun. The stones and the human voice can work in concert to create the very conditions that acoustic levitation requires, validating a crucial piece of the theoretical puzzle. The most ambitious experiments have ventured beyond mere sound and into the realm of material science, focusing on the piezoelectric properties of the stones themselves. Geologists have long noted the high quartz content in many megalithic stones, particularly the blue stones at Stonehenge. In controlled settings, researchers have subjected similar quartz-rich rocks to powerful, amplified vibrations to see if they exhibit any unusual behavior. While the results are preliminary, some studies have shown that these stones can indeed act as passive transducers, absorbing vibrational energy and re-emitting it in subtle ways. This has led to a fascinating hybrid theory. Perhaps the Druids didn't need to generate deafening levels of sound from their voices alone. Instead, their chanting and drumming might have been designed to wake up the circle of stones, exciting the quartz within them until the entire monument began to hum in sympathetic resonance. In this scenario, the human participants are the spark, and the stone circle itself becomes the engine, amplifying their initial input into a powerful, sustainable field of energy. This idea elegantly addresses the biggest hurdle in the theory, the immense energy requirement, by proposing a symbiotic relationship between the builders and their construction. Yet, for all the tantalizing data and compelling theories, a significant gap remains between what these modern experiments can demonstrate and what the legends describe. No experiment has come remotely close to levitating anything larger than a tiny polystyrene ball in a laboratory. The energy required to lift a multi-ton block of stone with sound waves is of a magnitude that is difficult to comprehend. It would likely be lethal to any living thing within 100 meters. This stark reality forces us to consider alternative interpretations. Perhaps the term levitation was never meant to be taken literally in the modern physics sense. Maybe it was a metaphorical or spiritual concept that was later misinterpreted. Or perhaps the technology did not involve suspending stones in mid-air, but rather used resonant frequencies to seriously reduce their effective weight or to create a state of acoustic lubrication, making them far easier to pivot and slide into place on a cushion of vibrating sand or a slickened track. This would still be a monumental achievement, turning a task requiring thousands of laborers into one manageable by a dedicated, skilled group. The ongoing work of these modern pioneers is not just about proving a specific legend true. It is about expanding our understanding of what ancient peoples might have been capable of, and in the process, rediscovering a forgotten dialogue between humanity, sound, and stone. Though the formal Druidic orders were shattered by Roman conquest, their fascination with the hidden power of sound refused to fade into silence. Instead, it seeped into the very bedrock of Western culture, resurfacing again and again in our art, our stories, and our spiritual longings, ensuring that the idea of sonic mysticism remained vibrantly alive. This enduring legacy is perhaps most visible in the various neo-pagan and Druidic revival movements that have blossomed over the last few centuries. Modern groups, drawing inspiration from historical fragments and a deep reverence for nature, have placed sacred sound at the very center of their practices. They gather at stone circles during the solstices, not with ancient instruments lost to time, but with their own voices, drums, and newly forged carnyxes, aiming to recreate that profound connection between vibration, spirit, and the living earth. For them, the act of chanting an invocation to the rising sun or humming a tone to bless a harvest is not a mere historical reenactment. It is a genuine attempt to reactivate an ancient technology of the soul, to once again harmonize human intention with the fundamental frequency of the universe. This revival keeps the core philosophy alive, the belief that our voices can do more than communicate. They can commune, heal, and perhaps even influence the tangible world. This mystical thread is woven just as deeply into the tapestry of our music and literature. From the enchanting melodies of Celtic folk bands that evoke misty groves and ancient magic to the monumental compositions of Richard Wagner, who filled his operas with magical horns and world-altering spells sung by powerful figures, the trope of potent sound is everywhere. In fantasy literature, J.R.R. Tolkien, a renowned scholar of ancient languages and myths, populated his stories with world-shaping sonic power. The most obvious example is not a staff or a sword, but a word. The secret name of God, Iluvatar, used to create the universe, and the devastating power of a single word, Melon, to open the gates of Moria. This is a direct echo of the word of power concept we explored. More recently, the beloved Harry Potter series introduced a host of spells that must be pronounced with exact verbal precision and focused will to achieve their effect, from levitating feathers to summoning patrons. These stories have introduced millions to the idea that sound, language, and intention are inextricably linked to manifesting change, a very Druidic concept packaged for a modern audience. Our fascination has exploded onto the silver screen, where sonic mysticism is often visualized with breathtaking spectacle. The image of a choir of monks using a deep, resonant hum to levitate a massive stone block appears in films like The Secret of Kells and Avatar, The Last Airbender, directly mirroring those Tibetan and Celtic legends. The entire premise of the Marvel character Black Bolt is that his voice possesses unimaginable destructive power, a force he must constantly restrain. Perhaps the most iconic modern example is the Drachenlord scene in the Hobbit trilogy, where a specific sung note unlocks a hidden door, a perfect cinematic representation of resonance as a key. These visual representations are powerful because they take an abstract concept and make it visceral. We don't just hear about the power of sound, we see its earth-shattering results, making the ancient legends feel immediate, thrilling, and strangely plausible to a contemporary viewer. Our journey into the heart of this ancient mystery has taken us from the misty sacred groves of the Celts to the cutting-edge laboratories of modern science, weaving together threads of history, legend, and physics into a tapestry that challenges everything we thought we knew about the past. We've stood with the Druids not as cartoonish wizards, but as the brilliant intellectuals and keen observers of nature. They truly were philosophers who might have glimpsed a fundamental truth about our universe that we are only now rediscovering. We've listened to the haunting drone of the carnyx, felt the immersive power of stone circles designed as acoustic instruments, and contemplated the profound responsibility that comes with wielding a knowledge so potent it had to be protected by a vow of absolute secrecy. This exploration reveals a world where the line between science and spirituality was not just blurred, it was non-existent, where a deep understanding of vibration and resonance was considered the highest form of both wisdom and power. What makes this quest so endlessly compelling is that it lives in that beautiful liminal space between what we can prove and what we can feel, a blend of tantalizing evidence and enduring mystery. The principles of acoustic levitation are undeniably real. We can all watch videos of scientists using sound waves to make droplets of water and tiny particles dance in midair. The acoustic properties of ancient sites are measurable facts, not speculation, and the persistent legends from cultures across the globe are too similar to be dismissed as mere coincidence. Yet, the leap from floating a grain of sand to levitating a 20-ton monolith remains a chasm that our current physics cannot cross. This doesn't invalidate the theory. Instead, it invites us to consider that the Druids may have possessed a different kind of science altogether, one that harmonized human consciousness with the latent energy of the natural world in a way we have yet to fully comprehend. They may have understood that reality is not just a physical construct to be dominated, but a vibrational symphony to be joined with the human voice as the most powerful instrument of all. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a sense of wonder and a humbling recognition of how much history remains unwritten. The stones still stand, silent yet eloquent, urging us to keep questioning, to keep listening for the echoes of a forgotten world. Perhaps the true legacy of the Druids is not a set of instructions for moving stone, but an invitation to reconnect with the world in a more profound, vibrational way, to understand that our voices, our intentions, and the very spaces we inhabit are all part of a larger, interconnected energy field. We are left not with a final answer, but with a far more exciting proposition, that the past holds secrets that can still expand our future. What do you think? Could an ancient culture have truly harnessed such an incredible force? Have you ever visited an ancient site and felt a strange energy or heard something you couldn't explain? Share your own experiences and theories in the comments below. I read every single one, and if you're as captivated by these enigmas of history as I am, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next journey into the unknown. Until then, keep questioning and keep listening. The past has not yet finished.